Okay, so we all think about love, right? Like who doesn't want to feel loved?
It's pretty universal, yeah.
But what happens when like that desire, that need to be loved becomes so strong, it kind of backfires?
Right.
That's what we're going to unpack today.
Yeah, it's interesting because you think of needing love as this sweet romantic thing,
Totally.
but this psychology lecture that we're looking at takes a different approach
Okay.
and suggests that this deep need for affection can actually be coming from a place of anxiety,
Oh, man.
almost like a defense mechanism.
So it's less about finding love and more about just feeling safe.
Yeah, exactly. The lecture even uses the term neurosis, but
Wow.
don't worry, we're not diagnosing anyone here.
Okay.
It's more about recognizing patterns.
Okay, got it.
So, like, imagine when you're feeling anxious and the world feels uncertain. What do you reach for? Maybe it's a favorite blanket or like a calming ritual or even just like being around someone who's comforting.
Yeah.
So this lecture is arguing that for some people, love and affection become that source of comfort.
Huh.
It's like a security blanket.
So instead of a warm blanket on a cold night, it's a warm hug when you just feel like everything's too much.
Yeah, exactly.
I could see that.
Yeah.
But how does that actually play out in real relationships?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The lecture suggests that people stuck in this pattern, they often mistake the need for affection as actual love.
So they're not really looking for a true give and take connection. It's more like they just want a quick fix.
It's more like they're craving something just to soothe those really deep anxieties,
Yeah.
to constantly feel reassured that they're safe and worthy and loved. So even a little bit of kindness or attention can feel like love to someone who's wired this way.
Because in that moment, the anxiety goes away.
Exactly.
That makes sense.
That-
But doesn't that create kind of a shaky foundation for a real relationship? Like what happens when that affection isn't there or it's not quite enough?
Well, you're hitting on a really crucial point here. The lecture actually dives into this paradox where even when affection is offered, someone with this deep-seated anxiety might not be able to accept it.
Wait, they're craving love, but then they push it away. How does that even work?
Okay, so think about it like this. Imagine someone who's starving and they desperately need food,
Okay.
but they're also terrified that any food they eat might be poisoned.
Oh, wow.
So the distrust is so strong that they just refuse to eat.
Even if it hurts them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is an example from the lecture to kind of show how deep-seated fear and distrust can actually sabotage the relationships that they want so badly.
So it's like this whole web of need and anxiety and distrust all at the same time.
It's complicated.
It really is. So what's at the heart of it all? What is driving this need to constantly be reassured?
Huh.
So we've been talking about all this anxiety driving the need for love, but like what's really at the core of it all?
Well, the lecture actually goes to a pretty deep place here.
Right.
It suggests that beneath this intense need for love, there's sometimes this repressed hostility.
Hostility. That feels kind of intense. Especially when we're talking about needing love.
Yeah, it's definitely a word that makes you stop and think. The lecture stresses that you got to be careful here. It's not about saying someone's a bad person.
Right.
It's more about trying to understand how anxiety can really kind of twist how we see things and how we act.
So less about like intentionally wanting to hurt someone and more about like a defense mechanism that's gone a little haywire.
Yeah, you could say that. So imagine this. You have a wife who seems totally devoted to her husband. She's always showering him with affection, wants to be close all the time.
Okay.
But underneath, she's actually really resentful of his success.
Really?
It triggers her own insecurities, makes her feel less worthy. This is an example from the lecture, by the way.
Okay.
And it shows how what can look like love on the surface might actually be masking something totally different.
So her need for affection, her always needing that reassurance, it's a way to control those feelings of not being good enough.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And maybe even a way to like subtly undermine his achievements because they make her so anxious. And it's important to really unpack this because we tend to think of needing love as this innocent, even cute thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But the lecture is saying when you understand the psychology of it, you see how it creates this cycle of insecurity and dependence and even resentment.
It's almost like chasing this feeling of safety, but never actually getting there because the need is coming from anxiety, not from actually wanting to connect.
That's it. The lecture says that this pattern can lead to a constant fear of being abandoned, having a hard time setting boundaries, and even idealizing partners who give them even tiny bits of affection, even if it's not good for them.
Wow, that's a lot. It makes you think about the damage this can do if it keeps going. So if someone's like, hey, this is me, I see myself in this, what can they do? How do they even start to get out of that cycle?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And this lecture doesn't really have a quick fix.
It makes
I
sense.
mean, relationships are complicated, but it does give us a place to start.
Self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Okay.
But how do you even do that with something this deep?
I think it starts by just seeing the pattern, like we've been talking about.
Okay.
Realizing that those times you're really craving love and reassurance. Maybe there's some deeper anxiety there.
Right.
And it's not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding it.
Oh,
Okay, if you walk into a dark room and you flip on the light, suddenly you can see everything.
Yeah.
You're not bumping into stuff anymore.
So awareness is the first step, but then how do you actually use that to have better relationships? Well, that's what I think is so cool. The lecture is all about this pattern in the context of neurosis. But it makes you wonder, what if just seeing that pattern, not to judge, but just to understand, what if that's the key to breaking free?
You mean not just in ourselves, but seeing it in other people too?
Totally. It's like having the secret code for how relationships work,
Yeah.
Imagine, instead of getting caught up in that back and forth, always needing to be reassured, what if you could offer something more steady?
Oh.
Not trying to fix the other person, but just creating a space where you can actually connect without all that neediness.
So instead of getting sucked into their anxiety, you're kind of showing them a different way to be.
Exactly. Because it's not about ditching people who are struggling with this. It's about interacting in a way that doesn't make it worse.
Wow.
It's about seeing those patterns in ourselves and the people we love and choosing to do something different.
This has been pretty intense. We started with this simple idea of needing love and ended up talking about anxiety and insecurity and all kinds of stuff.
That's what's so great about these deep dives, right? We're not just skimming the surface, we're going deep.
For sure.
It helps us understand not just the psychology stuff, but ourselves and our relationships too.
So to everyone listening, if any of this really hit home, just remember, awareness is the first step. And sometimes just knowing why we do the things we do can be really powerful.
Absolutely.
Who knows? Maybe this could be the start of something really amazing for you.